Okay. Where were your parents born? Where are they from?
My parents were both born in the city of Newton. One in 1887, I think, and the other in 1888. I'm the youngest of four children. Two brothers who have since passed away at a young age, and one sister who's still living.
Okay. Were you born in Newton yourself?
Yes, I was born in West Newton and have lived in West Newton all my 57 years.
Whereabouts did you live?
I lived on Washington Street down near St. Bernard's Church, which is, since both homes that we own, both of them have been torn down by the toll road. When the toll road came through Newton, it really sort of split and happened to take the two homes we owned down there.
Mm-hmm. What was your father's occupation?
He was a police sergeant.
Did he do that all his life?
Yes, he was 27 years a policeman, I think, and like 4 or 5 years a fireman before that. And before that, I really couldn't honestly tell you, but for all practical, that was, he died at 55, so, that was almost his whole life, entire life.
Did your father, enjoy being a policeman?
Yes, I think so. I think it was, all my 4 grandparents came from Ireland. They were all, none of who I remember, but, and I think that was the way that many of the Irish, came over here with the country, and if the next generation moved up to the police, or city workers or whatever it was, and my family was included in them. They ran that trend. I guess I had one grandfather on my father's side, on my mother's side, who evidently had a little money because they had a couple of homes that they had. But in addition to that, they moved the old West Newton Railroad Station and put it aside of one of our houses. So we lived there.
Did your father associate with the other men on the police force?
Yes, I think probably, family was first, although it was not a large family, but family was first, the cousins and uncle. But it was the typical type of thing that you would think. I have an uncle that was a police officer. I have, 2 first cousins that were police captains and now retired from the Newton Force. I had another uncle that was a fire lieutenant, that typical family of what you would think of that type of thing. And other than the family, as I reflect back, I would think, a high percentage of his friends were from within the police department.
Did your mother work outside the home?
No.
Did she have any help at the home besides you and your brothers and sisters?
No.
Okay. Did your parents have any interests, major interests outside the home, like clubs, or were they involved in politics?
No. My father played golf, and my father was an in the sense of, as I remember, he was the first president of the Police Benefit Association, and also president of Police Memorial Association. So he was that type of active within his own, organization. He played golf, but other than that, I can't remember any other, organizations that he was active in, and don't think he was.
Okay. Where did you attend school?
The first 8 years I went to St. Bernard's Grammar School, which is our local Catholic school here in West Newton. Then they did not have a boys' high school, so I went to 1 year of Warren Junior High School, which is in West Newton, the 9th grade. We have the junior high school system in our city. And then I spent 3 years at Newton High School and graduated from Newton High School in 1941. And I went into service in 1943 and spent 2 years overseas. And, came home in 46, January of 46, and then I went, my father had passed away, and I was supporting my mother at the time, and I went to Burke College. And for 2 years I graduated and went to work at that time. And I've been working ever since. But naturally, I worked part-time when I was
Mhm.
in high school and college.
What kind of interest did you have when you were a child, when you were growing up?
Well, I think sports was a big part of my life as a child. We had an interest in the Braves and the Red Sox, and I played sports and as a youngster, in junior high school and in high school. That was the only level that I ever played at.
Mhm.
But other than just the average kid of that era, I can't think of too many other interests.
Did you have a lot of free time, or were you working when
I
you were a
worked.
kid?
I started working when I was in junior high school in a drugstore, which was relatively near my home, and worked all the time I was in junior high school and high school part-time.
Mhm.
So that kept me pretty busy and also helped me, gave me some spending money.
How would you describe the neighborhood you lived in as you were youth? What were the types of people? Was it a close-knit neighborhood?
Yeah,
Or?
it was a relatively close neighborhood. It was composed almost entirely of Irish and Italian, with a stronger percentage of Irish. We lived on what is called the north side of Washington Street, which is or the bottom of the hill, and we had a very small black population, or at that time it was referred to as a Negro population in the area. Most of who served as maids and servants for the people up on West Newton Hill. West Newton Hill was not only did we look up to it from a height point of view, because we lived down the bottom of the hill, but economically it was where the maids and the servants and the butlers and the chauffeurs and the money people lived. Some of who we eventually associated with in our public school system, some of which we did not, but because they went to private schools. But the fact is they were, we did not socialize with them in any way similar to what we considered our interaction of 1982, of our socializing interaction. In those days, your social life was built around mostly your ethnic group, although we were certainly Americans with our parents brought there. It was the church was a bigger factor and a bigger social factor, I think, in those days than it is today.
Were you really involved with the church? Was
Well,
your family?
yeah, certainly I was in later years after we married, because I've been very active coaching baseball teams and organizing whether it's a CFM, and went through the chairs and president of the Holy Name Society and all the many other activities, whether it's a minstrel show or anything else. The church has been a life. Church has been a big factor in my life and my family's life, especially our generation's life, and continues to be much more so than the younger generation, who don't have that same social action within the church.
And did the church play a big part in the neighborhood?
Oh yes, I think it did. I think the church played a big part, and the lack of mobility played a big part. The lack of automobiles that we have today played a big part in it, because you were closer to your neighbors. It seems in our society today that you could drive 10 miles and be socialized with it, but you don't know your neighbor next door. And part of it is a mobility factor, because it's just the way that we work. But if you didn't have an automobile, you'd have to have more interaction with your neighbors unless you wanted to stay in your house.
How would you describe the city of West Newton as a whole when you were a child?
As a whole, it was almost two separate communities. One once again from the north side of Washington Street, and one from the south side of Washington Street. Neither of who seemed to associate socially. it was a good community. It was a good community to be brought in. I was up in. I was very, very happy with it. You know, you had limited knowledge of what was going on the outside, but that was also the times we were living in. You know, you had a lot of friends within the West Newton community, and those are the ones that you socialize with. But it was a good community. There was no pressure. There was very few problems. The problems of society today, you know, that we grew up with. You know, later on as we got into high school, of course, the problem became World War II. You know, but growing up, there was very any problems. You know.
Could you elaborate a little more on how the city was, you said, divided by,
Well, yeah,
Washington Street?
if as far as just West Newton was divided, I think that they were divided because there was little, very, very little or no social interaction, and because of probably basic economic reasons, but also it was there certainly had to be a degree of a religious reason, whether it was because of the Yankees who were controlling the city at that time of life and of my life, you know, were the money people of the city, and they were the churches. There was no interaction like today in the ecumenical movement type of thing between the Protestant and the Catholic Church, and they were far removed. And if anything, you know, it more of a an anti-feeling than there is in today's life and style. So as I say, the only probably social life that you had with them was your interaction at the high school level, but you still, in most cases, had very little to do with on a social basis. You still went back to your same social group. You played in an athletic team with them, but when you went Friday nights to go to the movies, which was a big deal in those days, you know, you seemed to go back to your own group. You know, I think that was pretty much true. Certainly there might have been exceptions, but much, much more than there is. You know, it was that type of thing.
You mentioned you went to a parochial grammar school. Did you want to go there, or did your parents decide that you'd be going to a parochial school? Or?
It's probably.
Or was it a neighborhood?
I would
thing?
guess it was. The grammar school was within a matter of a 5-minute walk on Washington Street from me. And certainly my parents made the decision whether they did it, because I would dare to say that probably 70%, if I was to guess at a figure, 70 or 80% of people with our background, read as a Roman Catholic background, went to the parochial school in our neighborhood.
How do you think the education of you got at a parochial school compared to the education the kids who went to a public school got?
Well, it's hard to measure. I've never been unhappy either way. Going to the parochial school, I think the nuns did a wonderful job on all of us. You know, they might have had 45 in a classroom, which would be unheard of today, but they had a lot more discipline, and I think they taught us a lot, and a lot of discipline, and a lot of things that were that helped in bringing up our family. You know, when I went to a public school, my recollection of it is that, you know, it didn't upset me because there were you know, enough people to do it. We sent all of our children to public schools. We were not upset. We think the Newton system is a good system. Some people will dispute us on it, but we've been very happy with all the results of of the public school system, and being a graduate of it. Yet, you know, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have one of our two boys went to Boston College and graduated 4 years ago, and one of them is a junior there now. we're very happy that he went there, but we didn't feel that strongly, that there was that strong of education, on Catholic education that was necessary for our children to go. Our son, had offers for free scholarships to go to Catholic schools, a couple of them, when he was in junior high school, and yet we let him make his own choice, and he decided on the public school. And it was not an unhappy decision on our part. We just let him make his own choice.
Where did you meet your wife, and how did you meet her?
I think I met her working in the drugstore. I gotta know. I think I met her working in the drugstore. She was born in West Newton and spent a lifetime in West Newton and grew up in West Newton. And so that was back in probably 1947.
And when did you get married?
When or where?
When?
1951.
And where'd you live after you were married?
We lived for a very short time, less than a year, in an apartment in Boston. And we built a home, not this home that we're currently living in, but another home in West Newton, about a mile from here. And we spent our first 15 years or so of our married life in that home. And then we sold that home and moved to this home about 14 or 15 years ago.
What job did you hold when you got married?
I've only really had two jobs. When I graduated from Burke College, I became a salesman for Colgate Palmolive Peat Company at that time. Worked for them for almost 4 years. I traveled to 3 northern states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Traveled up to Northampton at one time for them in that Western Mass, so I know that area. But I traveled up there, and when we were getting married, I hadn't really no desire to I had to reside up in that area. I had no desire to move up in that area because I didn't really care that much for it, nor did my wife want to go up there. So I looked around for another job. And I've been associated with Davis Sales for 31 years. I'm a part owner of it now. I joined the company then, and it's 31 years going on 32 years. So those are the only 2 jobs that I've ever had.
Did your wife work at all when you were first married?
Yes, until our first child came along. Or thereabouts, first 2 years, I think it was. She worked for 2 years.
I wanted to ask you a little about, you mentioned you were in the military. Were there, a lot of people from your neighborhood and things who entered the military at that time?
I would say most of my contemporary, I would say, 85 to 90% of my contemporaries, a few that fell into the category of that were medically unable to go. But other than that, I would say just about everyone went there because my age group were all too young to get married and have children at that young age. So just about 85%, and maybe even 90% or higher of my contemporaries went into the military service.
Where were you stationed?
Well, I was for a short time. I was in Camp Lee, Virginia, but they were getting ready for. I was only in the States for 5 months, and I went overseas and spent a couple of years over there. In the invasion of Normandy, I went over in D-Day. You don't want to hear my war stories. So. But I spent 2 years in Europe, 6 months of which I spent in the hospital, and a year in England and a year on the continent.
Now you said you were in a hospital. Were you wounded?
No, I caught rheumatic fever in combat, but I did go over in D-Day and invasion of Normandy and spent, about 6 months in combat.
Did your father serve at all in the military?
No, my father was too old and married and had children because, as I say, I'm the youngest of 4 children. At 57, I guess I would have had brothers that would be 60, 65 or 66 or somewhere in that area.
How did your family feel about you going into the service?
Well, I think that it was you know, it's so different than that time. My only sister, my two brothers were dead at that time, and my sister went in the service as an Army nurse, as a second lieutenant, became a first lieutenant. So both of us were together. And both of us were in the service, so my mother and father, you know, both of us went in. But at that time in life, it was an honor and an obligation, I think, and probably, at least in most of people's minds at that time, in that honor too, an honor and an obligation to serve. You know, things being, you know, different today. So both of us went in the service, both my sisters and I.
You mentioned you had two other brothers. Do you mind me asking you how they died?
No,
It
they
seemed
both died
at an early age.
Yeah, they both died at an early age of pneumonia. One was 6 or 7, and one was 2 or 3. I hardly, if remember them at all.
Was that relatively common?
Yeah, from what I can
for
understand,
children?
it was. It would certainly never happen today. You know, they'd give them
Yeah.
streptomycin or penicillin or one of the, you know, the antibiotic drugs, and they would be better in 72 hours. But it was a relatively common thing.
On a whole, how would you say your neighborhood or West Newton has changed from when you were growing up to now, to the present?
Well, I'd probably say the biggest thing is that the population complex has changed tremendously. If you want to consider the entire West Newton, the neighborhood itself has not changed. The immediate neighborhood has not changed that much. We, the second or third generation of immigrants, from the old countries, you know, the Irish and Italian being predominant, haven't changed that much on this north side of Washington Street that you see. Up on the hill that I referred to earlier has changed tremendously. The Yankees, a lot of them have moved out. They don't have the maids and the chauffeurs and the butlers because you can't afford it in the society. The homes have become 2 families and 3 families, and we've had a strong influence of Jewish people into West Newton Hill, which was not there at all when we grew up. There were very, very few Jewish people in our section of the city, and even in West Newton, even in our educational system in those days. Yet now they're very strong and very populated. They've made the educational system, they'll help to make the educational system what we like to think a pretty good one in the city of Newton. They're very strong in government, which I've been involved in. They've been very active, and it's a very liberal community up there, very, very liberal community up in what we call West Newton.
Now, you mentioned that you went to Burke College. When did you go and what did you study?
46, 47, and I studied business.
So you went after you got out of the service.
Yes.
Was that, relatively common? Were most of the people your age?
Yes, yeah.
And after you graduated, did you graduate?
Yes.
Okay, did you get a
Yes,
degree?
it was. It was a 2-year business college. They don't have the liberal arts subjects, and I just had to get to work to help support my mother because my father was dead, and there was no such things as pensions in those days.
That's unusual. Policeman.
Yeah.
No
It
pension,
was just a different society. My sister and I were supporting, and she got married, and
How long did your mother live?
my mother lived till she was 62.
Okay, let's see here. What else can I ask you? I'm kind of dying here for questions. So after you graduated from school, you worked for.
I worked for Colgate.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And how did you come to your present job?
I worked
Did
for
you?
Colgate. Well, as I mentioned, I worked for Colgate for almost 4 years, and I was, we were getting married. We were going to get married, my wife and I did not want to move up to the three northern states that I was covering for them as a salesman. So I looked around for a job around here, around Boston and home, and I found one. And that was where the manufacturer's representative in the same, what we call the health and beauty aid fields. I'm in the brokerage or manufacturer's representative field, and we represent a series of manufacturers in the health and beauty aid field, drug-related item fields, but not pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
And have been with them ever since.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you were into athletics. Do you have, what are your major interests outside the home now?
Well, my family and I still serve on the Recreation Commission, which I've been a member in the city of Newton for 14 or 15 years. Been a chairman for a couple of years, and I'm very active in that. I enjoy athletics very much. I was very fortunate that both of our boys, participated in athletics, which gave me a great deal of enjoyment. I tried not to push them. They might tell you differently if you were interviewing them, but I tried just to expose it to them. But it's something that and I enjoy most sports, whether it be hockey or basketball, football, baseball, and that type of thing. All of them really to some degree.
What do you think of the differences between how your sons grew up, now in West Newton to how it was 40 years ago when you were growing up?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of difference in the big differences in our society, our mobility of our society, and the mix of our society. As I have mentioned to you earlier, we were pretty much parochial in the sense that we socialized within our own small limited group because the automobiles weren't available, the mobility of society, and the ethnic groups we didn't associate in social. Now, my son's two closest friends, the quarterback on the football team happens to be a Protestant and a junior over at Harvard, and his other friend happens to be, his other closest friends is on his way to medical school, and he's a junior, and he happens to be Jewish and lives in another section of the city, far removed in the sense that it's 5 or 6 miles way over the other side of the city. Both of them are. And this is something that I was in no way was exposed to growing up. And both of them happened to play in the football team, and that he became close with it. But that he became close with them and has stayed close with them. And I think all through all of our children's education, I think and social life was much greater and in depth and exposure. They all had cars, and then that helped them a lot. And the fact that our city has changed so much, the population of our city, nobody has it down to the final percentage, but most people think it's probably approximately a third Catholic, a third Protestant, a third Jewish. And when I grew up, it was, if it was 5% Jewish, it was high. I would think it had to have been less than that even. And it's been, a great experience. That's one of the reasons why I was happy that and content with our children to go to public schools. Although I'm very happy that they went to Boston College, but I think it was a good experience because I think that's the fact that they went to public schools and met all kinds and of kinds of people. We hope that it will help them later on in life, because that's what's going to happen to them later on in life. Our oldest son, who graduated from BC, he took his first job up in Presque Isle, Maine, because that's the only place he could get a radio and TV job. He double majored over there in communications, and he never been in TV in his life, and got a TV job up there in the radio. And then after spending a year in there up in Maine, he went down to North Carolina and spent a year and a half down there. And and now he's in Columbus, Ohio, and he met his wife who came from California, who was an anchor girl on TV with him in Columbus, and it's such a wide and a mobile society, and such a big society. These type of things that we just never dreamt and never knew of. But I hope and think the fact that that he has been exposed to it at Newton High School or Boston College, then it's made him more easy to adapt to that society and the country that we're living in. Because when I grew up, you just wouldn't think of leaving to West Newton. The big thing is you moved to Waltham, which was 5 miles away. That was a big thing, and the only reason you did that because you couldn't get an apartment in West Newton. Now, there's exceptions to that rule, but there weren't many exceptions to that rule.
Mm-hmm.
But now, the whole society is changing so much. You talk about California, North Carolina, and Maine, and the way you talk about Waltham and Lexington and Brookline, and that type of thing. So I think, I think it's been a better experience for them. We were probably exposed to it, my generation, by the service, because we were thrown into it, just like you are at college, because your roommate could come from New Jersey or Puerto Rico or or wherever, and your classmates the same thing, and we just were not exposed to it, to our generation. So I think it's been a better experience, I would think, for the kids, better for them, and I think they will be better for us. And I think one of the greatest things, they gain the confidence, and they find out the fact that people are not different from Maine or North Carolina or Ohio. There's good and bad, and there's interest. And unless you have gone through that experience, you can no matter what a teacher tells you, no matter what your parents tell you, it's just you have to go through it yourself. It's just like we did in the service, and they're doing in their lives, in their professional lives, in their college lives.
Mm-hmm. Can we go back a little and talk about when you were a kid? Of course, today we have all the modern conveniences and stuff. Did you have to do like a lot of chores around the house and help out? And what kind of house did you live in?
We lived in a single house. We had only the one bathroom as compared to the 3 we have here, but I don't know whether that was, you never considered it a problem. We were fortunate in the sense that, we had a good-sized backyard with 3 bedrooms, so there was, enough room for everything. As far as chores, I can't remember doing, I started work in drugstore in the 7th or 8th grade.
Okay, so I was asking about the, your chores. You said you started working.
And maybe to cut the grass, or once in a while to put coal in the fire before you go to bed to make sure the ashes were down. And I can't reflect anything else. The chores that I think my kids, all of our children, started to work as early as I did. Every one of them, the boys have all had businesses of their own since the 7th or 8th, 9th grade. Both of our boys were in the 9th grade and had lawn cutting businesses of 20 or 30 lawns and had 3 and 4 kids working for them when they're in this and that at that age and all through high school. In fact, you know, both boys, with the exception, have helped to put themselves almost put through school by working. So they've been working, you know, one of them who went originally on a football scholarship is now paying his own way by working, you know, summers. So the chores, those are the only ones I can remember. And I think our children have worked just as hard, if not harder than we have.
So your mother didn't have a job, so
No.
How many hours would you say a day did she spend working around the house?
Well, I would imagine, you know, it was up early in the morning to make breakfast and off to work, and there was hand washing in the tubs in the sink. There wasn't any washing machines. There wasn't any dishwashers, but I would imagine be a total of, you know, 12 to 14, 15 hours a day, you know, with her all that time, you know. We had no television, naturally, you know, the radio was a big thing, or playing cards. You remember as a youngster playing around the kitchen table, you know, dining rooms in those days were reserved for Christmas and I guess Easter and maybe when an important company came from out of town, if there was such thing, and that was about it. But as I remember, you know, the washing and ironing was a long day, and so she worked pretty long hours as the mothers did.
I take it, you know, of course she didn't have a car or anything. She must have done all her shopping, etc., around the neighborhood, huh?
Yes, yeah, that's what you did. I remember doing a lot of it. You know, there were a lot of smaller grocery stores around there, not the big supermarkets that we talk today. And, you know, it was a daily thing. You know, you had ice boxes instead of refrigerators, so you couldn't keep, you know, the freezer. You couldn't keep, you know, go out and buy, you know, 20 steaks or whatever. You bought almost only on a daily basis, and you know, it was an icebox type of thing. Yet the store, I lived in you know, not too far from the square, so you'd do some shopping for your mother then, and it was only like a 5 to 7 minute walk. And she did it, and of course, you know, we would do it on occasion also.
Your father, you said, was a policeman. What kind of hours did he work?
Well, he was a detective for about 15 to 18 years or something like that. He's a policeman for a short time, then he became a detective. And then when he became a sergeant, they put him in charge of the traffic bureau. He was head of the traffic bureau in Newton for his last probably 4 or 5 years before he died. I would imagine originally they used to talk in the olden days of having 1 day off in 30, but his normal working day, I would think, would have been from an 8 to 6 type of day. In those days, when he was in the traffic bureau, he would have to go out and take pictures on the serious accidents, probably only in fatalities, but in which could mean some night the fatalities weren't like they are today, but there were some numbers, and he would be occasionally called out at night and have to take a photograph of a fatality or something like that. But his normal work day was either 8 to 5 or 8 to 6.
So he was home quite often?
Yes, yeah, he was home on a regular basis. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes, he was home on every evening, you know.
Okay. When World War II broke out and all that, you were, in your teens?
Yes.
I suppose.
Yeah.
How was, what was the feeling around? What was the big impact of, the world war and the thought of having to go to war?
Well, I think it's, it's a little hard to reflect it completely, but I think my generation just accepted it. First it was in Europe. We were studying it in high school in 38 when Hitler invaded Poland in 38 or 39, and we were studying about it then. And certainly there was some talk about it. I can't honestly say how serious it hit us, but that we were eventually going to be in it. But all the talk was that eventually, that America would be in World War II, and I think we just accepted it as that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say that we look forward to it because we didn't, but it was that in my mind, I think we had a concept that we had a choice of whether we fought them over there, referring to Europe and Japan later, or whether we fought, or whether they come over here and try to destroy us. So
Mm-hmm.
we just seemed to have that type of alternative, which was, settled in our mind that we wanted to fight them over there. So we all went, those of us who could,
Mm-hmm.
some of, had to be drafted, but it was just a question of you accepted it as part of your life,
Mm-hmm.
and not that anyone looked forward to it, and those that went through it even looked forward to it less because it was, a difficult thing. I was in combat, I think, at 18 years old in D-Day. 19. I just turned 19 a month ago and went over the invasion of Normandy. And that's your age now, or about. So, and when you see literally thousands or hundreds of thousands of people killed, but it was just part of life. And our generation saw an awful lot of our contemporaries killed in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Contemporaries in the sense of people you grew up with when you come back or you heard about it. And also you saw a lot of your buddies and stuff killed. But I mean, you just accepted it. I can't describe it any other way. I don't think it upset us emotionally. I don't think there was no such thing as draft dodging or conscientious objectives, or at least to any degree. There might have been a 2 or 3%, but none that I can really think of in my mind that anybody fell into that category.
Now it seems just, especially among people, I guess my age, there's this, a big fear of Russia and every move they make. There wasn't, of course, you probably didn't have a TV or anything in your house. How was what was the feeling about Germany and the moves they were making? The invasion of Poland and stuff.
Yeah. There was no TVs, but there was radio and there was newspaper, and they certainly are not as sophisticated or as communicative as they did. We studied about them in school, and we certainly knew about it. I mean, every news broadcast was, that Hitler had invaded Poland, or that Mussolini had joined up with Hitler, so war was the number one news item, even in those days, with limited communication, and we were conscious of it. As I reflect on it, I just feel that we just felt that it was just a matter of time before we America got into World War II, and Pearl Harbor was the crowning glory of it, and that was, or the beginning of it, and that was it, and just accepted it as such.
You were fairly young, and you said you went in the war and you went overseas. Had you ever been out of little neighborhood, etc. before that?
I had never in my life been out of I can't say I should never be out of Newton. The big thing in those days was to go to a Riviera and Nantasket, but you were not affluent enough to have a summer home, or even able to rent a home for 2 weeks or a month on the beach, where everybody in our generation does. The generation of the society does today, I should say, the society we're living in today. So, no, I was just a small time, just like everyone else living within a small society. The only, Newton is a different community. You know, we have 13 little villages in a city of 90,000 people, which is just, you know, very unusual. So when at that time, we did not have a shopping center. We have, you know, the mall, which you call over by Chestnut Hill now, but I mean, so most of the shopping would be done by nearby Waltham, which is a much smaller city than us. It's only a few miles from us, and they have even in those days had a shopping center. So if you went to buy a suit for First Communion or for Easter or graduation or whatever it was, you went over there. You took the bus over there, and that's where you did some of the shopping. I have if any recollection of going as far as Boston to do the shopping, you know, type of thing. So
it must have been a kind of a frightening experience then, if you know, you really hadn't been out of this, you know, neighborhood more or less too much, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're drafted, sent, or you enlisted and were sent overseas.
yeah, I think it was. I think the two things that probably kept your sanity was your religion, number one, your good family background and your training, you know, and those type of things kept your sanity, you know, being shot at and seeing so much death and all that. And the third thing was that in your mind, and at that time in life, and it might be hard for you to conceive it right now, that you really didn't have a choice. You know, there wasn't the outlet to go to Canada. There wasn't you know, the protest, you know, the draft resistance, whatever it might be.
Because it was scary even for me just to register for the draft.
Yeah,
never
right.
mind being.
Yeah.
Think about being drafted itself.
As I say, we just seemed to, you know, you were so convinced in your mind that you're doing right. Certainly it was lonesome. Certainly it was tough. You know, but there were 8 million of us. You know, I'm not trying to give you an impression that, you know, you were there by yourself. There were 8 million. You know, I mean, just everybody that was draftable physically was there, which had to be 90 to 95% of the, you know, my contemporaries. So you just accepted it. It was a matter of which branch of the service or which luck of the draw that you happen to, you know, be, you know, how long you're going to join the States, what outfit you joined, and some people were able to stay here longer. You know, there were certainly some people that volunteered for combat, you know, and for airborne and rangers and different things like that. I was not one of them, but I volunteered for service, but I was not one to volunteer for that. But I accepted when it did, and I had, you know, there was never any thought of going AWOL or never any thought of not doing what was by you know, the biggest percentage of us doing what your job was to do, and that was to try to get, you know, the war over with. As soon as possible, I go home.
So, you know, seeing as how you were from kind of a small neighborhood and it was predominantly Irish, or
Irish, yes.
Did you know, did you make a lot of friends when you were in the service? Because you must have been meeting you know, people from totally different backgrounds and.
Yes, I think we did. Yes, so I know we did. The only problem you had was that I was in a more difficult position than the average guy, and then that I moved around much more than most people, most GIs or most servicemen. Most of them joined an outfit and spent their time with them. I had 5 months training, infantry training, and then was shipped overseas because they were starting with the second front, which doesn't mean much to you, but They had come up from North Africa and Sicily and Italy, and they knew that they were never going to win the war that way, so they had to go over eventually through France or Luxembourg or somewhere in continental Europe to get to Germany. And so they were getting ready in England, so they were bringing anybody that had any training over there, and they brought them over there. So we joined a company and joined the First Army, went over the First Army invasion, and you went from one outfit, and as soon as we had captured Normandy, you wound up with the Third Army down with General Patton, and so I moved around a lot. And then after 5 months of combat, I wound up in a hospital for 6 months in about 9 or 10 different hospitals. Then you come back and joined a replacement company. So it was for another. I came back from continental Europe back to England and that type of thing. So I moved around a little bit, but certainly you acquired a lot of friendships, and it's like similar to college, even more so. But you're thrown in. You were, when you arrived at BC, you were in most cases, I would presume, thrown in with one or more roommates, and gradually you found some classmates and or your roommates or those in the dormitories that you had more in common with socially, and that you spent some of your leisure time with them. Exactly the same thing, whether you went to the Rats and had a few beers with them, or you went to a ball game with them, or whatever it was. And that was the same thing in the service, and you were just thrown together, and you reached your kind of your own level socially, and other things that you wanted. The only probably one of the big differences in college that come to your mind that you would have in the service, you had a different age group, and when you come to college, you're all approximately the same age. But you got to remember, when we were thrown in the service, I could be bunking the side of somebody 32 years old that had a wife and 2 kids back from South Carolina, where that would not be true of college. So you'd somehow wind up with the younger kids, and that's what it was.
How had Newton changed at all, or was Newton changed at all when you got back from the service? Was it did it look good to find a job and all that?
Yeah, it looked great. See, my generation. It's hard to generalize it, but our parents. I think my father went to the 5th grade, and our parents did not motivate us, and this is overgeneralization because there's certainly exceptions, and there's certainly some parents that did do it, but they almost thought a college education was beyond our grasp, unless you happen to be really one of the few, extra smart ones that somebody picked out for a scholarship. Financially, it really wasn't, but in their minds it was, for somebody who really wanted to work at it. And there were certainly many of my contemporaries that did go to it. But I think that the GI Bill of Rights opened it up to everyone, to every veteran anyways, and the whole idea of it, of a college education. And, so the motivation was there. And we all thought that we needed a college education of some type to be a success in the world. Success being in quotes, most of success even at that time, and maybe still today, measured by dollars and cents, is in a position in life, and is successful. And at that time, most of them were looking forward to the family life that they had, the happy family life that most of them had grown up into.
Mm-hmm. So, you mentioned your father through the 5th grade?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how about your mother? Do you remember?
No, yes, I think my mother came from a little money because she went to a woman's secretarial college, which was very unusual, yeah. In those days. My grandfather on my mother's side had a little money because, as I say, they had a couple of homes and things like that. And none of this I really remember. It's just hearsay type of thing, but my mother did.
It's unusual that she did. She went like to a secretarial school, but she didn't work at all.
I think that's the way society was. You know, there were very few people worked in those days. The proportion of women that worked, you know, you just got along without the extras, the things that the women's work, and you know, the women don't only work for, you know, the second car or the family or the summer home, but a lot of that society today is, you know, part of that working, but a woman's place was in the home, quote, you know, that's not an ERA expression, but I think it was an expression, you know, a thought of that generation. They didn't let them put it that way, but that's the way the generations lived. You know, there were very few women working. Even, you know, if you as you remember, as you look back at the school teachers you had in school, most of the women school teachers, and there weren't that number, were misses. You know, that is unmarried girls. You know, you know, that type of thing in the public school system.
Okay, well.
The only other thing that if you're still interested in West Newton, the politics of West Newton, you know, I spent 6 years as a Newton alderman, and the politics of Newton has changed tremendous in, you know, 14 years in recreation and other many involvement. And the politics of Newton has changed tremendously. It's become a very liberal city in some portions of it, yet it's become a Republican city. When I was, I ran against an incumbent first in 1963, and there are 24 members of our city government who run on the Board of Aldermen. And at that time, there were 22, our first term, my first term that started January 1964, there were 2 Democrats and 22 Republicans, and I was one of the 2 Democrats. And, you know, I ran against a Republican incumbent because I felt that there should be some representation of from this general area of West Newton, which there wasn't. At that time, there were 3 people from West Newton Hill representing the West Newton, all good and capable people, probably, possibly and probably much more capable than I. But because of my understanding of the area and bringing up in the area and feeling that it was a good place and it was a place that I wanted to bring my family up and wanted to stay here, and I have been fortunate enough too, that I thought I should, you know, do something. I'm not trying to make it sound waving a flag type of thing, but I did want to get involved in the government and wanted to make sure it was good, so that's what but it was interesting to go up there with only 2 Democrats and 22 Republicans, you know, and see, you know, how the government has changed. I would guess the complex now is a 50-50 or a much higher percentage of Democrats, because this was a Republican-controlled city. When we were up there years ago, although I think it's like the 12th or 13th biggest city in the state, it has the 4th biggest budget, you know, in the state. Only Boston, Worcester, and Springfield spent more money at the time that we were up there, and part of it is because we had the 4th biggest school system in the state, because a lot of people moved to Newton because of their school system, you know, and so the politics of the city has changed. It's became much more liberal as the Jewish population has. We have probably more ADAs per square foot than any other section of the city. You know, our congressman is very liberal. Our legislators from the south side of the city are very liberal. They have a tendency to be very liberal. Our mayor, who is a Republican, and to the best of my knowledge, we've never had a Democratic mayor, at least in modern times, is also very, is liberal, you know, and so it's, and our school committee is very, very, you know, liberal in the sense that I'm not saying I'm complimentary, because at one time I thought I was a liberal, but as I get older I find myself more conservative.
I think everybody does, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.